Welcome everyone. Let's begin our lesson for today by going over the learning goals and success criteria. First, what are we learning? We're learning how to find the slope and y-intercept of a function from an equation, and we're learning how to graph linear functions using slope and y-intercept. How are we learning it? Through the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 notes and the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 assignment. When can we use this? To calculate the amount of money in a savings account? How do we know we learned it? By getting a score of 4 on the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 assignment. Now let's take a look at our agenda for today. We will begin by going over the learning goals and success criteria. While we do that, you'll fill out your Get It Started. Once you've completed your Get It Started, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. After that, we'll go over the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 notes, and then I'll give you time to complete the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 assignment on Desmos. Once you've completed the assignment, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. At the end of class, we'll go back over our learning goals and success criteria while you fill out your before you go. Your only homework for tonight is to continue working on the Linear Inequality Study Guide and any incomplete assignments that you may have. Let's take a look now at the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 notes. The notes begin with the learning goals and success criteria. Now let's talk about slope. What is slope? Slope is a rate of change involving x values and y values. Slope is known as for being the change in the dependent variable over the change in the independent variable. Now what does that really mean? That really means that slope is the change in the y values over the change in the x values. So it's always y over x. And the next part you need to know is the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the point where the linear function crosses the y-axis. So we have a line here, and we can see that the y-axis goes here. So where do they intersect? Well, they intersect right there. That is what we call the y-intercept. So in this case, our y-intercept would be 2. Slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is written as y equals mx plus b. And what does that mean? M is the slope, and B is the y-intercept. Y and x are my variables that stay variables so that I can plug numbers in and see what they come out to be. So M is the slope and B is the y-intercept. Now how can I remember that? The easiest way I remember this is M represents the slope because it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So think about it in terms of relationships. People that are involved in relationships and they break up, there's usually that one person in that relationship that's always hanging on to the relationship that's already dead. That's the slope. That's M. It's a slippery slope to get hung up on your ex. They are not together anymore. But the M is always trying to hang on. Notice how close they are. So M is trying to hang on, and it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your ex. Now B, on the other hand, is alone, not attached to anybody. B is lonely, and lonely people ask the questions, why am I alone? Why does no one want me? Why does no one think I'm cute? That's B. B is always asking the why questions. Those are the y-intercept questions. So that's the way I remember it. It's a slippery slope to get hung up on your ex, and why am I alone? So that's the way I remember slope and y-intercept. Now, let's go ahead and pick out the slope and y-intercept from an equation. So we're given an equation, y equals 2x plus 4. And we want to know what is the slope of that line. Well, we know that the slope is the one that's attached to its x, right? So it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So the one that's attached to the x in this case is 2. So the slope is 2. The y-intercept is the lonely one. Why am I alone? Well, the lonely one is 4, so my y-intercept is 4. So that's how I pick out the slope and y-intercept given an equation. Let's look at another example. We have y equals negative 3 halves x minus 3. Well, same thing. It's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So the slope is the one that's attached to the x, which is negative 3 halves. So that's my slope. And my y-intercept is the lonely one. Well, the lonely one in this case is negative 3. So B is negative 3. So that's how I find the slope and y-intercept from an equation. Now, how do I graph a linear function? Well, first thing I need to do is pick out my slope and my y-intercept. Well, in this case, my slope is -1/2 because that's attached to the x. Now, my y-intercept, notice there's nothing here. There's no lonely people. So how do I say none in math terms? Well, that's 0. So my y-intercept is 0. So now when I graph this, the first step is I plot the y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept is 0. So I'm going to go along my y-axis and find 0, which is right here. And I plot my point. The next step is I'm going to use the slope to plot my second point. Remember, this is change in y over change in x, or you might have heard it in the past as rise over run. We're going to talk about it as change in y over change in x. So my change in y is -1. So I go down 1. And my change in x is 2, so I'm going to go to the right, 1, 2, and plot my point. So now I have my first 2 points. The next step is just to connect the dots and draw a line between them. So I'm going to connect the dots. And now I have a linear function that is graphed that goes through 0 and has a slope of -1/2. There's a video here also that shows you how to graph linear functions in Desmos. So you can go ahead and watch that. Let's talk now about how to check our work with linear equations using Desmos. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to desmos.com, just like this, and we're going to click on the link that says Graphing Calculator. And over here on the left side, we can enter the equation of any linear equation and it will graph it for us. So let's try y equals 2x minus 4. Well, as we can see, it graphs it for us. We can check that against whatever we did on our assignment now. And you can do it this way. Let's say we had an equation, though, that wasn't in slope-intercept form. We can still graph that on here and check our work. So let's say it was 4x minus 2y is equal to 8. And we can see that that's actually the same as this one. But we can look at this and check our work this way as well. It still graphed the equation in slope-intercept form, even though the equation we put in is not in slope-intercept form. So this is one way that you can check your work using Desmos to find linear equations. Let's talk now about how to sign in to Desmos to complete your work. So what we're going to do is you're going to click on the link to go to the assignment, and it should take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And right here where it says sign in with Google, we're going to click there. And it's going to pop up with our email accounts. You're going to click on your school email account, and it should already have you logged in because you should have already been logged in using Google Classroom. From there, I'm just going to click start the activity, and it will take me into the assignment and allow me to begin. So that's how you will log in to Desmos using Google. Let's take a look now at the Graphing Linear Functions Part 6 assignment. The assignment begins with the learning goals and success criteria. If we scroll down, there's a link here to take us to the Desmos activity. Go ahead and click on that link. And it should take you to a page that looks like this. We'll go ahead and click Start the Activity. Now from here, we have our learning goals and success criteria. And then we'll go ahead and click Next. And it gives us 2 functions to graph on each page. So the first one says graph y equals x. So the first thing I'm going to do is plot the y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept is 0. So I'm going to go here on the graph and go to 0 and plot my point. That's my y-intercept. And my slope, in this case, there's no number in front, but there is 1x. So in reality, the slope is 1. So that means I'm going to go up 1 and to the right 1 and plot my point. So there's my 2 points. Now I'm going to use the little line tool to connect the dots. And I have to do it in each direction, which is a little unfortunate, but it'll work out. So we're going to go ahead and click here and drag through the other point and keep it going all the way through, just like that. And then we're going to do the same thing in the other direction. So I'm going to click on this point and pass through this point here, just like that. And now I have a line that represents y equals x. Then I move to the next one. The next one says y equals negative x. So again, my y-intercept, there is none listed here, so none as a number is 0. So I'm going to go ahead and put a point here at 0. And then I have my slope is negative x, so that's really a negative 1x. So that means I'm going to go down 1 and to the right 1, and I plot that point. Now I'm going to use the little connector tools, the line tool, to click on this point and drag it through the other one, and then through this point and drag it through this one, and now I have a line that represents y equals negative x. And I'll continue to do that for each of these slides. So there's 2 graphs per slide. I'll do that for each of these, all the way until I get to the end on slide 9. I'll continue to do it, and then once I'm done with all the slides, I'll go back to my Google form. I'll click next. This will send me to my before you go. Once you fill out your before you go, then you can submit your assignment on Google Classroom.